In this video, we're going to be going over the 5 worst agents that you should avoid playing in this act. Well, there are a lot of characters that are really good and easy to win with in the meta. There are some characters that are either underpowered, hard to use, or they're just flat out not very good right now. So I'm going to break down some of these worst agents, but if you want to quickly climb on some amazing agents, we have so many updated agent courses on the SkillCapped website. They're going to be breaking down how you learn a new main incredibly quickly, so what are you waiting for? Check it out right now in the links down below. Now, some of these characters are going to have certain caveats where there will be situations where these characters are legitimately great to play, but there are a lot of other situations where we would suggest avoiding them. Number 1 is Reyna, and Reyna is a phenomenal character, especially if you're the best player in the lobby by far, right? If you're clicking every head or if you're smurfing, you can take over an entire lobby, but there's a couple of problems that can come with players that just lock Reyna every single game. They don't play anything else, and it comes down to the fact that Reyna can break so many rules that you don't learn the strategic aspect of the game as a whole. Like, you find it most with Reyna players where they know how to click heads, they have great mechanical skill, but as far as knowing how to trade, knowing how to position, knowing where to play, they just forgo a lot of these things. And oftentimes Reynas get a really bad rap, and sometimes it's rightfully so, about being all aim, no brain. Now, I think that it could be fantastic having a character that has the means to put an entire game on their back if you're hitting your shots and you're performing mechanically really well, but the problem is that mechanical skill is something that increases linearly, right? It's going to take a certain amount of hours, a certain amount of practice to get better mechanics over time. It's not something that you're just going to magically have after a little bit of grinding. So if you're trying to rely only on your mechanical skill, you could end up being stuck in the same rank for a very long time playing Reyna because you're not bringing any value outside of your ability to take specific duels and win them. Not to mention, if you're ever interested in scrimming and getting into the more competitive side of Valorant, you're just not going to be able to play Reyna. She's not a good character specifically for the scrim environment, so you're not learning the game overall from a game sense level. You're relying on your mechanical skill way too much that doesn't improve at a very dramatic rate, and you are also setting yourself up to never be able to scrim. If you're okay with these 3 things and you just want to run it down on Reyna, by all means, lock Reyna, but recognize that there are going to be limitations to your individual development as a player if this is the main that you pick. Now, before we talk about our winners, let's talk about SkillCapped.com, the only place that you're going to quickly climb to Immortal and beyond with the press of a button. From tips and tricks on how to get better aim to better positioning and decision making, we got everything you could possibly need, so check it out right now in the links down below. Now, the next agent was a little bit hard to slot in because I don't necessarily think there's anything super wrong with this agent, but due to his competition, there are a lot of more competitive options, and the character I have in question is Gecko. Now, I understand that a lot of people like Gecko, they like his play patterns, but there's a couple of problematic aspects about Gecko that make him a lot more difficult to get value with than many of the other initiators that are super strong right now. Number 1, Gecko is best when you have coordination. If you have people that are willing to route and grab your utility, or very specifically play off your utility, you can get more value, and that's how it is in pro play, and Gecko still just doesn't see any pro play, so in ranked play, he's even worse than that. And I do think that Gecko could use some solid buffs to make him more competitive with many of the other initiators. Pretty much every other initiator has something going for it that Gecko just doesn't provide. And while I do think that there are specific strengths to Gecko, like the fact that you can reuse a lot of your utility, and your utility is dynamic, meaning it can do a lot of different things, it's not strong enough in its current state, unfortunately. Now, if you're an absolute god, you can still get a lot of value with Gecko, and I don't think that's anything super wrong with the character. I just think he's a little bit underpowered compared to the rest of the cast. Now, you could say, I'm going to grind Gecko now, and I'm going to just get really good at him so that when the next big buff comes around, I'm going to be ready to take advantage of that. And you could certainly do that, but recognize that there are a lot of other initiators currently that are just way too strong not to play. Like, they're really free wins if you get good at a lot of these initiators, and Gecko, you're gonna have to work a lot harder for it, but if you really like the character, you like his design, you like his style, by all means play him. He's just one of the characters I had to put in here because honestly, most of the other characters in the game are fairly strong, and there's a legitimate reason to pick them over others, and I just don't think you can make as good of an argument with Gecko compared to other initiators. The next character that we gotta talk about avoid playing or maining is Harbor, and it's not really that there's anything specifically wrong with Harbor, it's just that it's very unlikely to get an optimized scenario with Harbor. I think he can be fantastic in a duo controller setup, but if you're ever playing him as a solo controller, this is just not the way. Harbor is a very terrible solo controller where you're going to be very inconsistent in your value. You're not going to be able to do what you need to do as a controller to fulfill the role, and you would be better off playing just about any other controller most of the time. Now, this doesn't mean that Harbor is super weak or bad or anything like that. He's just very specific in the ways in which he needs to be used, and due to the chaotic nature of ranked, it's going to be hard to slot that in. I definitely think that you could have Harbor in your pool if you're specifically going to rock it when someone else is playing that other character that you need to run the dual controller setup, or if you're rocking a duo and you plan to auto lock this every single time, then yeah, that's perfectly fine. But with most players not locking enough controllers in the low ranks of play, and there oftentimes not even being a controller on either team, Harbor is just really going to be very niche in when you're playing. And if he's the character that you're absolutely best at, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to play him in a situation that's optimal for you. Now, in addition to that, though, dual controller setups are often more strategic in nature, meaning they're going to be better the higher in rank you go, the more coordination and synergy that you have. So dual controller just flat out is going to be a bit weaker at times than some other compositions if you just don't have any synergy or any communication. Now, I will say, though, that Harbor can be a really powerful character if you're playing him as like someone that is more flexible, not necessarily being a controller for the sake of your team, but being a controller to set up your own plays or like a joint play with someone else. He can be a really great way to take space control, especially in ranked, and do it in a really unorthodox way, not really copying what the pros are doing and using him in that way, but using him as like a specialist that can take certain angles on point and apply extra pressure. You could play him on some untraditional maps like Bind, for instance. But overall, I do think that Harbor is going to be pretty niche, and he wouldn't really be a character that I would suggest maining and trying to lock a whole bunch. It's just going to be hard for you to do so. Now, the next character I'm going to talk about is actually one of the strongest agents in the game, but he's on this list, and it's KO. And you're going to be like, why is KO on this list? Well, we actually have data from Riot that says that KO has a negative win rate in every rank. Like, he is one of the worst characters by the numbers in ranked play. And you might be wondering, why is that the case? Why is KO such an inconsistent or low win rate character? And really the reason comes to a couple of things. Number one, KO is better with coordination. It's better with players that play off your utility, players that play off your information, play off your flashes, play off your denial of abilities. These are really important things, so you don't always get those in ranked. Oftentimes people are like, oh, they're there, okay, whatever, we're not going to play off them. And it's not really as good of a direct way to try to utilize your ability to make a play yourself. And it can be kind of frustrating with KO being very reliant on a team-centered aspect. And then another thing is a lot of people just don't learn the proper lineups to play this character well. Like, really, KO's best at setting up the team, especially with pop flashes over the top on maps like Ascent. It can be super, super strong, but you need your teammate to have the proper timing and you to actually hit the lineup. A lot of KO players just don't really learn what they need to learn to get the full value out of KO. So while KO can be a very good and strong character, we know he's one of the strongest agents in the game. The disconnect is that most ranked players are just not accessing any of that value, and they're losing a lot of freaking games on KO. So this is not just to tell you to just flat out not play the character, but if you are going to commit to KO, you would be doing yourself a disservice to not fully learn the things like the lineups and other aspects of the character that you need to make him someone that is more of a team player and not like this solo flash superstar where you're just trying to run it down and be like a pseudo duelist. Now, the last but certainly not least, this is like the one character on this list that I think I can legitimately just say don't play. Like the other characters, there are caveats, there are certain situations where you can play them, whether you like them, whether you're good at them, whether you master them. This character, I don't really care about those things. I would just say, like, don't play this character flat out, and it's Deadlock. Deadlock is probably the weakest character that we have seen on release and is currently the weakest agent by far. This character needs massive buffs to be good, and right now her abilities are just very inconsistent. I think only one of them can get any value, and it's just like not good in every single situation. And there's a lot of abilities in the game that are just way better, and specifically in the Sentinel role, there's just other Sentinels that you would much rather play. Deadlock is one of the hardest characters to get consistent value. Really, I would not suggest playing this character in most situations at all, even if you're very, very good with her. And I would just, you know, put her on the sideline, put her shelved, and you can whip her out when she gets some serious buffs, which you will be getting before too long. I know that for a fact. So just wait, put her on hold, and before too long, you'll be able to play her, and she'll be actually good. Hopefully we get some reworks, but most likely just some buffs at the very least. But Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these picks down below. Now, speaking of which, to help you with everything that we've talked about and more, SkillCapped has top level tips and tricks over how to practice better, play better, and have a better mindset in every single game you're playing. So if you really want to improve not only your win rate, but how well you are impacting each and every round you're in, definitely check it out right now down below.